Well, the newly established Investigative Directorate against Corruption Oversight Office has said it is already investigating several high-profile complaints. Now, this comes after the IDAC has come under increased public scrutiny in recent months. Now, last week, IDAC senior investigator Colonel Brian Padayache gave evidence before the Madlanga Commission relating to allegations involving the Directorate. Also, IDAC head Andrea Johnson did not appear before the Commission as expected last week after being admitted to hospital. But she is expected to appear before the Madlanga Commission tomorrow. So to talk to us more about these developments and what's been happening at the Madlanga Commission, we're joined now by the Executive Director of Corruption Watch, Lebogang Ramafoko. Thanks so much for your time, Lebogang, and welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let me first just gauge your assessment of what we've heard so far about IDAC, especially in testimony at the Madlanga Commission. And this against a backdrop of there were some suspicions as the body was established, where some people felt it never should have been established in the manner in which it was to begin with. What have you made of what has been said of IDAC?
So we will recall that one of the recommendations by the Zondo Commission was that IDAC becomes permanent. It is a body that should have all the expertise that is needed to fight corruption, because at that time it was very clear that corruption on its own was very complex, that, it had linkages to organized crime, and that, in fact, you needed a unit that will be permanent within the NPA. And that is why in 2024, the law was changed, legislation was changed to establish IDAC as a permanent structure within the NPA. The problem, I don't think, is with the structure. The problem has been many. First and foremost, the ombudsman that we are seeing now being announced was also meant to be in place from August 2024. Consequence management and oversight over IDAC is the thing that has been missing. Even at the ad hoc committee, General Mkhwanazi did mention and indicate that the appointments that were made, particularly Padayache, were people who had never handled investigations. And in fact, it was embarrassing, not only for him, but for the president, in fact, who has promised us when he ascended power that he will fight corruption, to have the commissioners school him on basics of investigations. So the issue here for us is definitely appointments. You can have all the structures that are there, but when you are not appointing and you don't have oversight over appointments, you then get what we saw at the Madlanga Commission, and also the head of IDAC being implicated in leaking information and acting in a manner that is, very questionable.
Just staying with some of the shortcomings here with regard to IDAC, that lack of oversight, how pivotal has that been in what we are seeing now? Because we see the newly established IDAC Oversight Office saying that it's already investigating several high-profile complaints. So just talk to us about that in terms of setting up structures without the necessary or the requisite oversight over them.
The problem with setting up appointments does not only relate to IDAC, even the NPA, and hence with other stakeholders under the prosecutions project, we have also advocated that the NPA becomes independent. It is currently under the Department of Justice. Its budget is under the Department of Justice. It cannot appoint without going through the bureaucracy of the Department of Justice. In some instances, it even was struggling to procure offices. So, when you are establishing with good intentions a structure, you must actually make sure that all the processes, when you establish a structure, work in such a way that it is enabling for that structure to perform well. So first and foremost, you are having in 2024, IDAC becomes permanent. It has struggled with appointments, so as the NPA has struggled with appointments. The Ombud was not established in 2024. It's only happening now, creating an impression that in fact the Ombud is coming now because IDAC is under pressure and the NPA and the Department of Justice are under pressure to demonstrate that IDAC as an institution or as a body can have integrity. But we have seen, and it is an issue even in Parliament, the lack of consequence management, the lack of oversight makes, even when there is one complaint, when you let it fester, you actually send a message to those that are implicated in the complaints that in fact you are not going to take those complaints seriously. So it is really justice denied, because it becomes justice delayed for those that have complained. And therefore, I think the biggest lesson here is administratively, how do we set up institutions? We make sure that they've got the requisite independence, the requisite resources, the requisite capacity to act on time, especially because we saw, this is not the first time we are at a commission. The Zondo Commission already showed us how organized corruption is in South Africa. And it's not called state capture just because it's a nice name. It is capture. It is not one individual doing wrong. It is a system of people infiltrating different departments. Now we are seeing what is happening in the police. And the fact that we have not had the ombuds, we still don't have an independent NPA, points out to the fact that what is written on paper and what actually is done, there is absolutely no correlation. And that is what makes us find ourselves here.
And of course, you mentioned integrity. If we look at what we've heard so far through a testimony before the Madlanga Commission, for one, and what seems to be a battle, for lack of a better term, between IDAC and crime intelligence, what should we then make of the integrity of the investigations that have been done so far?
Well, I guess right now, anybody who has had or know of those investigations, has been a complainant, have raised issues, will have no trust in crime intelligence in South Africa. And it speaks to appointments. As Corruption Watch and with others, we have basically said it starts with appointments. But it also starts with the rigor in which, even after you have appointed, you monitor and you make sure that you analyze what has been done. The fact that the Ombuds is sitting with several complaints means that there has been complaints. People have raised issues, and those issues have really not been investigated or not investigated sufficiently in time to make sure that the integrity of the office, stays intact. And IDAC, the NPA, the Department of Justice are going to have to backpedal and do so much in the eyes of South Africa. Sakina, you will remember the issues we are talking about here are not victimless. We are sitting here with people suspended, when people have lost loved ones, when women have been raped, when children, mothers are looking after children on drugs because the police, are implicated in selling drugs that have been confiscated. So every other South African should worry when our crime intelligence is a mafia on its own. In fact, rather than run away from criminals, we are going to have to run away from people who are paid with state resources to be the ones in positions. They must be beyond reproach, and there must be some constant ethical checks and balances. Every small case that comes forward to the Ombud that says an investigation was done correctly, a particular member. I mean, there have been questions raised about how General Khan ascended to the position that it is. That suspicion allegation should have been thoroughly investigated. I don't know whether in South Africa we actually actually do not realize just how dangerous it is not to take corruption seriously, how dangerous it is that right now the threat to peace and security and stability in the country, because a country that has laws that are drafted, in a very rational manner, a country that has expertise that we are seeing at the Madlanga Commission continues to put in positions of influence people that are mediocre at best. You listen to Padayache and you ask whether or not, you couldn't have pulled somebody in the street to do the job. And you wonder whether there isn't a big agenda for the looting to continue. There is no separation from what we found out from the Madlanga Commission to the Zondo Commission. We were warned. We knew that there are agencies, both working internally and externally, to capture this country. And we have not acted at the speed and the seriousness we should have acted. And every month, about 185 reports come to Corruption Watch of ordinary citizens, where the police and every other issue, when people steal money from hospitals, it is a black poor woman who delivers babies on the ground. So these issues of integrity are not abstract. They are felt by ordinary people on the ground when their loved ones are killed, raped, and the police are not there because the police are the criminals, or some members of the police are the criminals. These appointments must be scrutinized. They must be scrutinized. The next head, if the current head is removed of IDAC, they must be scrutinized. Every complaint must be dealt with seriously, and then we mustn't wait until there are several complaints. Every individual complaint must be taken seriously because of this integrity question. But integrity is not only abstract. It's not how we feel. It's how we experience, and the consequences on ordinary South Africans when we don't take corruption at this high level seriously.
Well, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Executive Director of Corruption Watch, Lebogang Ramafoko, talking to us about the developments at the Madlanga Commission. And of course, today's witness M will appear in camera, but tomorrow we'll see the return of Advocate Andrea Johnson. We had a false start last week, but who knows, perhaps tomorrow we will hear her testifying at the Commission.